Your eyes are not neutral, they are gateways. What you consistently look at doesn't just pass through you, it shapes you. That's why Scripture doesn't just tell us to believe or behave. It tells us to fix our eyes, to set our gaze, to look upon what is holy, eternal, and true. But the world knows the power of a glance. That's why distraction isn't just everywhere, it's strategic. The enemy doesn't always attack your character directly. Sometimes he just keeps showing you things that slowly shift your focus. Because what you repeatedly watch, you start to want. And what you want, you eventually walk toward. This is the quiet war. Not for your morality, but for your attention. Where you look shapes who you become. Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. Your eyes are the entry point to your soul. What enters through them plants itself in your thoughts, your emotions, your desires. That's why the serpent didn't start with a lie. He started with a look. You can't look at everything and stay grounded in anything. The soul wasn't made to hold 10,000 voices a day. Even Jesus said, if your eye is single, your whole body will be full of light. What you stare at, you start to reflect. You become what you behold. If you keep gazing at what drains you, don't be surprised when your joy disappears too. The gaze is sacred because it steers the heart. Before David sinned with Bathsheba, he didn't touch, he looked. Some battles are lost in the glance before they're lost in the act. Where your eyes linger reveals what your soul is hungry for. That's why guarding your gaze isn't legalism, it's spiritual survival. You won't walk in fire if you're always looking backward. Lot's wife didn't fall because she failed to run. She fell because she looked back. Some places you were rescued from aren't meant to be stared at again. Focus isn't just about productivity, it's about purity. Purity of vision leads to clarity of purpose. Guard your gaze so your calling doesn't become clouded. The devil doesn't need to drag you into sin. He just needs you to keep watching what slowly dims your spirit. Not all darkness comes in sudden collapse. Some arrives drip by drip through screens, scenes, and scrolling. Distraction is what pulls your gaze off what is holy and onto what is hollow. Everything that glitters isn't gold, and everything that captures your attention isn't worthy of your focus. You won't burn for God if you're constantly looking at what the world celebrates. Holiness takes a steady eye. You can't set your gaze on Him and envy the altars of idols at the same time. The wrong gaze will drain your anointing. Samson saw, then chased. His strength didn't leave in a moment. It left through many moments of unguarded vision. What you see over and over becomes what you accept. Desensitization happens through the eyes. Guard them so your convictions don't die slowly while you're watching. Not everything deserves your eyes. Some things were made to be walked past, not studied. Looking too long can lead to living too low. Some of your fire is being stolen, not because you've sinned, but because you've stared. You're not falling, but you're fading. Your gaze is leaking your strength. Eyes can wander before the feet ever do. Sin doesn't start in the hands, it starts in the vision. Guard the first glance so you don't need to recover from the last step. Gaze determines appetite. The more you look at it, the more you crave it. Your soul was never meant to feed on junk. Turn your eyes back to bread that satisfies. You can't pursue your calling while watching everyone else's highlight reel. Comparison enters through unguarded eyes. Before you know it, you're discouraged over a path you were never called to walk. When God is your vision, everything else comes into order. Seek first the kingdom. Fix your gaze. Alignment follows attention. The enemy doesn't just want your sin, he wants your sight. Because if he can blind your vision, he can blur your purpose. There is no revelation without discipline of vision. Prophets saw because they looked. Saints burned because they beheld. The power is in the gaze. If your attention is constantly scattered, your fire will be too. You are made to burn in one place, not flicker in 1,000. A quick look can lead to a slow fade. It only takes a second to start drifting from what matters most. Like a boat that loosens from the dock, the drift is quiet, almost imperceptible. Stay anchored. Keep your gaze tied to truth before you forget how far you floated. The heart will chase what the eyes keep feeding it. Guard your eyes so your heart doesn't hunger for what can't nourish it. Like a river guided by its banks, your heart flows where your gaze leads. If you keep watching bitterness, you'll crave revenge. If you keep watching grace, you'll long for restoration. Your destiny is too weighty to be built on wandering vision. Purpose requires a gaze that refuses to be pulled in every direction. Nehemiah didn't build the wall by entertaining every distraction. He said, "I'm doing a great work, I cannot come down." That kind of vision builds legacy. There's a difference between noticing and dwelling. You can't always control the first glance, but you must command the second. David didn't fall because he looked once. It was the second gaze that opened the door to his downfall. What you entertain, you empower. Some of your tiredness is spiritual eye fatigue. Looking at too much nonsense makes it hard to see God clearly. You weren't created to hold the weight of every headline, every highlight reel, every crisis. Your soul needs a still gaze, one anchored in the one who gives rest. Before Eve took the fruit, she saw that it was pleasant to the eyes. What you see can deceive. Learn to ask, is it holy or just shiny? Some things sparkle to distract you from their poison. It's not about appearance, it's about alignment with purpose. If the devil can get your eyes, your hands will eventually follow. Vision precedes action. Guard your gaze to guard your walk. Like Achan, whose eyes fell on the forbidden and whose downfall followed, it all started with a glance. Direction begins with attention. Don't feast your eyes on what would starve your soul. Some things entertain you but empty you. They offer quick pleasure but erode long-term peace. What fills your feed may be draining your spirit. Watch what you're watching. Your eyes were made to fix on glory, not wander in gossip. Where your vision goes, your spirit follows. Gossip steals your fire one stare at a time. Fix your eyes on the God who reveals, not on whispers that distract and divide. The eyes are the lamp of the body. What they gaze on either fills or dims your light. What enters becomes what energizes or drains you. You don't fuel a fire with darkness. Light feeds light. Fill your vision with what fuels your purpose. Fix your gaze, and your feet will follow. Vision determines movement. Without vision, people perish. Without focus, they drift. Peter walked on water not by strength, but by direction. His eyes stayed on Jesus until the waves won his attention. You can't see God clearly when you're focused on being seen. Obsession with visibility clouds, spiritual clarity. Saul lost his throne because he feared the people more than he feared God. What you gaze at for affirmation can blur your assignment. Some of your anxiety is coming from what you're constantly looking at. What you watch has a voice, and it speaks loudly to your nervous system. Peace can't reign where fear is on replay. If you want rest, redirect your gaze. The eyes can fast too. Sometimes you need a break, not from food, but from visual noise. A fast of the eyes resets the soul. When you intentionally step back from the constant flood of images, entertainment, and noise, you give your spirit space to breathe again. In that stillness, clarity returns. Sensitivity to God sharpens. Your hunger for truth grows stronger. Some breakthroughs won't come until your eyes stop feasting on distractions and start gazing on holiness. Guarding your eyes isn't fear, it's faithfulness. You're not running from the world. You're choosing not to be formed by it. You can't cultivate holy desires with unholy vision. The more you stare at what isn't pure, the less you'll hunger for what is. Jesus looked at the Father, constantly, intentionally, always. And it was that gaze that sustained him through betrayal, mockery, and the cross. Some of your prayerlessness is rooted in screen fatigue. Your spirit is too foggy to focus. Turn your eyes so your heart can return. The reason some altars have gone cold is because the eyes left the flame. What you stop looking at, you stop tending. Look again. Repetition creates revelation. Keep looking at truth long enough, and it will eventually transform you. There is nothing casual about the eyes. Every glance is a seed. Every gaze is a direction. Every focus is a future. You won't see heaven's movement if you're hypnotized by earth's noise. Spiritual perception begins with disciplined vision. If your gaze is unclear, your path will be too. Blurred vision leads to missteps. God's will often comes into view when your eyes align with His heart. The clearest people in the Spirit are those who have trained their eyes, not to avoid reality, but to stay anchored in eternal things. Eyes that always want entertainment will never see revelation. Truth doesn't shout. It waits to be looked at with reverence. You can't protect your peace and constantly consume chaos. You can't expect stillness in your spirit when you're filling your eyes with crisis, conflict, and noise. If you're always feeding on news cycles, drama feeds, and endless scrolling, you're not nourishing your soul. You're disturbing it. Anchor your gaze in things that restore. Scripture, nature, silence, worship. Let your peace be guarded by what you choose to see. Vision is not neutral, it's sacred real estate. Don't lease it out to anything that dishonors your purpose. The soul is led by sight more than we admit. You walk where your gaze leads. That's why focus is warfare. Sometimes your deliverance starts with a redirect. Look away, look higher, look again. Because where your gaze goes, your life will soon follow. Distraction is the enemy's silent detour. He won't always use destruction. He'll use the subtle shift of your attention, just enough to keep you from finishing what God asked you to start. When your eyes wander, so does your will. The more time you spend looking where you shouldn't, the weaker your resolve becomes to follow where you should. Like David on the rooftop, he wasn't planning to fall, but his eyes wandered before his heart ever did. Or like us, scrolling past our calling while staring into everyone else's feed. The will follows the eyes. The longer your vision drifts, the less strength you have to walk in the direction God intended. A scattered gaze leads to shallow roots. You can't plant deeply while glancing everywhere else. Vision requires stillness. Focus births depth. Not all curiosity is innocent. Eve looked, and it was beautiful, but it was deadly. Not every beautiful thing belongs in your gaze. If you keep looking at the storm, you'll forget how to walk on water. Peter sank when his eyes left Jesus. Your strength is tied to where your gaze lands. Some of your peace will return the the moment your screen time drops. The battle for your eyes is the battle for your emotional stability. Pull back to return to peace. The eye gate is often the first to fall when spiritual warfare hits. If the enemy can get your eyes, he doesn't need your heart. Where your eyes go, your affection follows. The first sin in Eden started with vision, not rebellion. Temptation didn't begin with defiance. It began with observation. Protect your sight like you would your salvation. You don't need to try harder. You need to look better. The issue isn't always discipline, it's direction. Where are you looking? You can't walk in purity if your eyes are loyal to pollution. It's hard to stay clean when you keep playing in the dirt with your attention. Purity requires separation, not just from sin, but from what numbs your convictions. Guard your gaze like a gate, because once it's opened, what enters stays longer than you expect. Look long enough at fear, and it becomes your default. Whatever captures your gaze will eventually claim your reality. Just like the spies who saw giants and forgot the promise, fear takes root when your vision is filled with threats instead of faith. Redirect your eyes before fear rewrites your future. Focus is a form of faith. Fixing your eyes on what is unseen is an act of trust. Sight becomes submission. Think of Peter walking on water. His focus wasn't on how deep the sea was, but on the one who stood above it. Every step was a declaration. I trust what I'm looking at more than what I'm walking through. In the same way, your faith is revealed not just in what you say you believe, but in what you keep your eyes fixed on. Every scroll, every swipe, every story plants a seed. Your habits of attention are forming your desires. What you feed your eyes will soon become your appetites. You're not just watching, you're cultivating. Guard your gaze, or you'll grow what you never meant to water. Just because it's visible doesn't mean it's valuable. Your eyes will be drawn to the loudest light, but true wisdom often glows quietly. It's the difference between Saul's height and David's heart. One looked the part, the other carried the call. The world will constantly spotlight the flashy, the trending, and the loud. But what truly transforms you is often tucked away in stillness, humility, and obedience. Train your eyes to recognize quiet brilliance over noisy brilliance. The crowd is loud, but the King speaks in stillness. If your eyes are always on the world, you'll miss heaven's whispers. The noise of culture, trends, and public opinion is relentless. It demands attention, rewards performance, and thrives on urgency. But Jesus never competed with noise. He retreated to the quiet, where heaven's voice could be heard without interruption. Just like Elijah, who didn't find God in the earthquake or fire, but in a still small voice. Sometimes your breakthrough is waiting behind a whisper that only still eyes can hear. Looking back can cost you your future. The Israelites wanted Egypt because they kept looking at what was, instead of who was with them. Longing for yesterday will blind you to today's manna and tomorrow's promise. Let your gaze move forward. God's glory is ahead, not behind. The more you look at lies, the more you doubt truth. Repetition breeds belief. Even a lie, when viewed long enough, begins to sound like wisdom. If your gaze is saturated with falsehoods, your soul will lose its anchor. Let truth become your dominant vision. Let Scripture flood your feed. Keep your gaze fixed, not frantic. Spiritual growth requires undistracted eyes. Think of Martha, anxious, pulled in many directions, trying to do everything but missing the one thing that mattered. Meanwhile, Mary sat still, eyes on Jesus, receiving what couldn't be taken from her. Frantic vision leads to spiritual burnout. But a fixed gaze steadies the soul and makes space for breakthrough to meet you in the quiet place. The devil doesn't need to defeat you. He just needs to divide your attention. A split gaze weakens even the strongest calling. Like Nehemiah, you must refuse the invitation to come down. What seems small is strategic. Distraction is delay in disguise. If you've lost your vision, maybe you've surrendered your gaze. Pick it back up. Look again. God hasn't moved. You just stopped looking. Like Elijah in the cave, the shift doesn't come from sight alone. It comes from attention. The vision lives where the gaze returns. Where you stare is where you steer. Even in traffic, your car drifts where your eyes go. So does your life. If your focus is on lack, you'll move toward it. If your gaze is on promise, your steps will align with provision. You can't fight a holy war with distracted eyes. Spiritual warfare requires laser focus. You can't slay giants with a glance toward distraction. David didn't bring down Goliath by checking Saul's opinion. He fixed his gaze on the target. Fix yours. The flame on your altar fades when you stop looking at the fire. Your gaze is the matchstick. Keep it lit. Revival dies where attention drifts. The fire stays burning when you tend it with focus, not familiarity. Vision leaks when you keep refilling it with comparison. Your fire will dim trying to burn like someone else's. Like Saul dressing David in his own armor, it might look useful, but it won't fit your fight. Your gaze must stay on your own assignment if you want to walk in victory. Fix your gaze and find your footing. Clarity doesn't come from doing more, it comes from looking better. When your vision sharpens, your steps stabilize. Before you run, look. Before you strive, see. What you see clearly, you walk confidently. You can't crave what you've stopped beholding. To desire God again, look at Him again. Hunger begins with vision. Like the Israelites looking upon the bronze serpent and finding healing, restoration begins when the gaze returns to the giver. The eyes lead the mind, and the mind commands the body. It all starts with a glance. Guard it like your life depends on it, because it does. One glance turned Lot's wife to salt. Another glance drew Peter to Jesus on the sea. Direction is born in what you choose to behold. Don't measure your faith by what you feel. Measure it by what you're focusing on. Emotions shift, but gaze reveals allegiance. Even in the garden, Jesus was overwhelmed with sorrow, but his eyes were on the Father's will. Steady focus, not steady feelings, shows where your faith stands. Stop staring at what doesn't speak life. Death can be dressed in beauty too. Choose your light carefully. Like Eve in Eden, some things sparkle but suffocate. Let your eyes search for what breathes hope, not what entices but empties. Every holy fire starts with a holy focus. Before anything burned in the temple, the priests prepared their gaze. So should you. Attention is the first act of worship. Where your eyes settle, your offering begins. Looking at your weakness too long will rob you of strength. Lift your eyes to the hills, from where your help comes. Peter didn't walk on water by analyzing his steps. He walked because his gaze was on the one who made the waves obey. You can't walk in freedom while gazing at your chains. Focus on the door, not the lock. What you look at becomes what you believe. Paul and Silas didn't fix their eyes on the prison walls. They sang toward the God who breaks chains. You were never called to stare at the darkness. You were called to reflect the light. Glory isn't seen with passive eyes. It's pursued with holy vision. You are the light of the world, not a mirror for shadows. Lift your eyes, and the brightness will follow. The gaze is prophetic. Where you're looking is where you're going. Start seeing what God sees. Abraham saw stars and believed in nations. Elisha's servant saw horses and chariots of fire. Eyes of faith behold more than eyes of fear. The deeper the calling, the stricter the gaze. Prophets couldn't afford distractions. Neither can you. The higher the assignment, the narrower the lens. Elijah heard God not in chaos, but in whisper. So must you. You won't see miracles if your eyes are glued to mediocrity. Heaven's moves often begin where earth's distractions end. Elisha asked for a double portion because he refused to look away from Elijah. Miracles follow the gaze that refuses to be casual. Don't waste your worship on what can't see you back. Idols never return the gaze. Only God does. The golden calf didn't lead Israel, it distracted them. But when Moses looked into glory, his face shone for days. A fasted gaze unlocks a burning heart. When you look away from what dims you, you'll begin to feel again. Just as Jesus fasted in the wilderness, your eyes need consecration too. What you turn from can reignite what you've forgotten to feel. Stop gazing at guilt. Look up. You've already been forgiven. Fix your eyes where mercy reigns. Peter wept, but Jesus met him on the shore. He didn't stare at Peter's shame. He gave him a mission. Grace starts where your gaze shifts. God's promises don't come alive in a distracted heart. Distraction breeds delay. Real focus pulls fulfillment forward. A focused heart is like Mary sitting at Jesus' feet, unbothered by noise, unshaken by comparison, absorbed in presence. But a distracted heart moves like Martha, busy with many things, missing the one thing that mattered most. The promise doesn't always come faster, but it comes clearer when your gaze is fixed on the one who gave it. The narrow path requires a narrow gaze. Broad vision leads to broad distraction. Keep your eyes on the road, not the crowd. You weren't meant to run every race, just the one marked out for you. Let your gaze filter the noise so your feet stay on the right path. What you won't stop looking at, you'll eventually follow. Your future follows your fixation. Like a compass, your gaze directs every step, even when you don't realize you're moving. Fix it wisely, or you'll drift by default. Purity of heart begins with purity of eyes. If you want to see God, stop clouding your view. What you gaze at either sharpens your spirit or dulls your discernment. Clear your sight, and clarity will follow. You don't need to see the whole staircase. Just keep your eyes on the next step. Faith walks forward when focus stays fixed. Abraham didn't have a map, he had a vision. God said, "Look at the stars, not the street signs. Trust the next step more than the full layout. Look where the fire is, not where the fear is." Peter walked when his eyes stayed on Jesus. The moment fear distracted him, he sank. What you magnify will either drown your courage or ignite it. Keep your gaze locked on the flame that never fails. Your gaze can heal or harm. What you stare at shapes you. Vision either pulls you into healing or keeps you circling your wounds. Choose the view that restores, not repeats the pain. A guarded gaze protects divine timing. What you look at too soon may kill what God is still growing. Like fruit picked too early, some visions must stay hidden until they're ready. Don't ruin the harvest by watching in impatience. Don't stare at the clock, stare at the caller. Delays don't mean denial. Keep your eyes on who sent you, not how long it's taking. God's timeline isn't rushed by your restlessness. Gaze on His face. not the ticking of the world's clock. When your eyes stay on Him, your feet don't fail. Steady gaze, steady walk, unshakable peace. Every storm is less about the waves and more about where your eyes are. Peace isn't the absence of chaos, it's presence in the midst of it. Glory follows a faithful gaze. Keep your eyes on what is unseen, and one day you'll see more than you ever imagined. Moses didn't just see the bush, he turned aside to look. That turning became his calling. Faithful vision leads to divine encounters. I'm your host, Abigail. Stay focused, stay faithful, and above all, guard your gaze. Your fire depends on it.